now we'll have Mark Adams share his experience in Brazil.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Mark Adams, and thank you all for just coming here this evening, or this afternoon, to hear me talk about my time in Brazil. Okay. And just as a small introduction, my name is Mark Adams II. I am a junior pursuing a degree in art with a concentration in computer graphics. And when it came down to traveling abroad to Brazil, this was actually like my first time really being in a foreign country, mostly alone and independently. And this is also the longest time I've ever been in a foreign country. When we arrived at the airport, there was just a really wonderful display of lots of costumes that were based off of various orisha, which are parts of Afro-Brazilian religion that you can find in the country. And those were on display at the airport. We also got to pass by several beautiful pieces of architecture, including notably Christ the Redeemer, on our way to the hotel. And even at the end of the day, we got to have steak as a sort of toast to our arrival. Having lived in like more rural suburban areas, the city of Rio de Janeiro was a bit of a culture shock because one thing you'll notice about like cities that have large populations is that everything is kind of switched. You have a building that's like not even bigger than the DJR itself, but you'd have like 4, 8, maybe even 12 stores somehow like bunched up into it. And that was a very interesting part of traveling to Brazil and getting used to the city. I didn't feel like there were like big major like shocks in terms of culture specifically. For the most part, communication was based more on things like hand gestures, imagery, body language. But one thing I did notice was the sort of focus on more organic material. Like, for example, there were a lack of sweeteners in foods. You have a lot of real fruit at restaurants, and it's just something that I find pretty interesting to think about how the U.S. is pretty different to many other countries in regards to how our food is prepared. One thing that I think I wanted to emphasize a lot was the knowledge I gained in Brazil. The focus of our trip was the diaspora of Africans that were brought over to Brazil during the heydays of slavery. One such example is a woman named Tia Cira. She was born in Bahia in 1854, and she is known as one of the key figures in the development of samba and carnaval, 2 Brazilian musical art forms that have, stood the test of time and been around for a long while, even to this day. I think my favorite part had to be going to the Samba Garage in the city of Samba. Basically, it's a sort of samba school where everything you see in Carnival, from like the dancing choreography to the parade floats to the costumes, this is where they put that together. And me and the others on our trip, we got to do a little dress up. You can see Dr. Koto and Miss Merrills there as well. And next is just a bunch of images that I took from the city of Samba, because as an art major, the costumes, the floats, the concepts, it all spoke to me, and it really sort of gave me a vision of I would love to do someone who like works for a company like this. I would love to have this as my career, because there's just so much expressiveness that comes from the designs, from the colors chosen, from just the way they look, to the themes. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think there's a lot of beauty in Carnival, and that sort of shows the beauty that comes from even like rough times. I also wanted to showcase a few other pictures of landmarks that we took, such as, of course, Christ the Redeemer. We got a monument to the dead for World War II, because Brazilians did participate in that war. We also have Sugarloaf Mountain, and pictures and sculptures from the Institute of Research and New Black Memory Museum in Rio. And for my little dessert, the one I wanted to focus on, I wanted to focus on a dolce de leche crepe. I got one on Sugarloaf Mountain, and it's like a normal crepe. It was actually the first time I've ever had one. But what it was made of, it's called dulce de leche, and it's basically like a combo of milk and sugar. It looks a bit like caramel, but it's not exactly caramel. It's really good to eat. It's hard to describe, but it's kind of like melted pudding is how it felt for me, and I sort of wanted it to represent like just my abroad experience in general, because it was hot at first, but like it was something new and interesting that I hadn't tried in a way that was unique to Brazil. I think the biggest challenge when it came to Brazil was something I mentioned beforehand, and that was communication. My Portuguese isn't the best, so I had to rely a lot on hand gestures, imagery, things like that, because it wasn't just a matter of technical skill, but also things like culture. I'd speak very formally when talking to people who would be more used to informal manners of speaking, and it was a pretty interesting little shock to go from the classroom learning experience to having to communicate with people on the streets of Brazil itself. I feel like I often, in spite of being able to come up here and just do this public presentation while barely even looking at the screen, I do struggle in a sense to connect with people. So alongside just learning more about African diaspora, this trip was also there for me to grow into someone who was a bit more social, even if just by a little bit, and got me used to not only just meeting people who were different from me and finding out that we're not so different, but also learning to sort of overcome barriers in speaking and connect with others.